Hello there, IELTS students. Welcome to IELTS Podcast. You no longer have to worry, fret, or panic about IELTS because we are here to guide you through this test jungle. Enjoy these IELTS tutorials, and if you need more help or want to access the famous online course, you can visit us at IELTSPodcast.com.
This podcast is a collection of ideas that I've been kind of playing around with for quite some time. I wanted to just give listeners some tips, some advice on how to approach the writing section of the exam, as I know that this is the section most people, I can say with fair certainty, have a problem with. So it doesn't just focus on one area of the writing exam, it focuses pretty much on everything. So I wanted to kind of collect all these ideas and share them, hopefully to help you guys all improve, which is the goal, of course. Okay, I was basically thinking about some of my own students and some of the students who I've met here through IELTS Podcast with the essay correction service, and advice I give them and things that have come up over and over and over. The first thing I want to talk about is the actual test day. I think that when people begin writing, I think the typical thing is, well, start with task 1 and then go to task 2. And yeah, okay, that's logical. But in terms of test taking, it's probably not the smartest thing to do. I will explain why. One reason, of course, is that task 2 takes twice as long and it gets double the marks. So that means that it's really, really important to dedicate time to it, to, really focus a lot of energy on getting the best task 2 that you can. So that's the obvious answer here. But there's some other things that you may not be aware of which make it important to start with task 2. This has to do with how complete your 2 tasks are. What do I mean? I mean that, let's say you run out of time. Let's say you're on your conclusion. Let's say you're on the last couple of sentences of your writing test. Now, if you've started with task 1, you finished it, you moved on to task 2, and you run out of time in that last paragraph, for example, guess what happens? That's an incomplete essay. And that is seriously going to affect your coherence and cohesion score. All you need to do is look at the band descriptors for task 2. And if you look through that coherence and cohesion criteria, you'll see that it talks about organization of ideas, missing paragraphs. I can't remember how exactly it's phrased. I'll have to look it up. But essentially, it is imperative that you finish the entire task 2. It's not the kind of thing where you can leave a word out or you could leave a sentence out and, you'll be okay. No, it'll seriously drop your score. My sources have told me that I think it can even be like a 5 for coherence and cohesion. So you really don't want that to happen. The point here is obviously make sure you finish task 2. Now, what happens if you don't finish task 1? Well, if you're doing general, it's still a problem, because if you run out of time and you don't have that closing, you don't have that sign off where you're saying yours faithfully, yours sincerely, or lots of love, or whatever. If you don't have that, that's a problem too, okay? If you leave out your name, it's fine. Okay, so as long as you have your sign off, if you've said, yours faithfully, and you just stopped, that's okay. But you do need that sign off. So those of you taking general, you need to be careful and make sure you finish both. However, those of you taking academic, if you leave out something in your task 1, if it's at the end, chances are, if you've done your task 1 the way you're supposed to do it, chances are that you'll just have missed some detail. If you've started with your introduction and then you've given your overview and then you've talked about all the broad main details and then moved on to some of the minor details, if you've missed some of those minor details at the end, probably not a huge tragedy. This, by the way, is one of the reasons why I always tell people to write their overview right after their introduction. Because if you do decide to do task 2 first and then task 1 second, if you don't have time and you haven't written your overview, that's a huge problem too. So the takeaway here is, and I'm going to direct this to those of you taking academic, try to start with task 2 first, and then when you do your task 1, write it introduction, overview, and then the detailed paragraphs. Okay? This way, if you do run out of time, it's just some details that are missing. All right, so that's the first thing about test day. Now I wanted to say something a little bit about test studying strategies. I've had students in the past say to me, okay, well, here's my strategy for preparing for IELTS. I'm going to focus first on listening. I'm going to do all the listening tests that exist, and then when I'm done with listening and I'm happy with how I'm doing the listening, then I'm going to move on to reading. And after reading, I'm going to move on to writing. And then after I'm done with writing, I'm going to spend the last 3 weeks of my test preparation on speaking. Okay, everybody prepares for tests differently, and, if it works for you, great. However, I think that this particular type of preparation is a bad idea. My suggestion to all of you is try to do everything together, okay? Don't just lump listening together or reading together, especially with the sections of the exam that require productive skills, and by that I mean speaking and writing. You really should be doing both right up to your exam day, or a couple days before. I mean, you might probably want to rest a day or two before and just kind of review all of your essays and the things that you've written, or some key notes that you may have taken. But in terms of writing and in terms of speaking and preparing those, you really need to be doing that right up to the end. Why? Because writing and speaking are skills like many other. If you don't practice them, you will lose those skills. Maybe not 100%, of course not, but it's really important to be in shape and to be, in tip-top condition, prepared and ready and really in good form. My advice regarding your preparation is to do it like that. Try to do all of them. Don't just leave one behind in order to practice something else. Keep all of those skills really in good condition right up to the exam date. So the other thing I wanted to say is also about preparing. I know that a lot of you self-study. That's okay. I mean, that works for some people. Maybe you're not working with a teacher. What you need to do is familiarize yourself with the different topic areas in writing and absolutely make certain that you have covered all of those topics. Okay, it's pretty easy to find what the most common thematic areas are in IELTS. And I think at this point most of us know what they are. It's things like education, crime, environment, technology. There are many others, but it's also pretty easy to find essay topics kind of organized according to those different themes. Okay, so make sure that you are writing on all of those different topics, that you have the necessary ideas and vocabulary that will help you write those topics. And that also holds true for the different type of questions that are asked. There are discuss both views, there are do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, there are things like problem and solution, there's also reasons and solutions, causes and solutions. I mean, there are those 2 question essays. So really make sure that you have enough practice with all the different types of questions and, of course, the themes that come up. Now, so far I've been talking about task 2. This clearly applies to task 1 as well. Those of you taking general, you know that there will either be a formal letter or an informal letter. There are different types of topics that can come up. Try to see what some of those different ones are. While there are many essays and many letters and examples out there, do try to give yourself enough variety in your preparation. I know some people like to just write like to what extent do you agree or disagree essays, and like that's it. That's not going to do it though. That's not going to prepare you the way you need to be prepared. Right, I was saying about task 1, give yourself a nice variety in your preparation, but especially those of you taking academic, do be aware of all the different types of task 1s. If you're not sure what they are, let me see if I can give you a little rundown. We have line graphs, pie charts, bar charts, diagrams, process diagrams, we have tables, we have maps. Maps are a big one. And then, of course, there's often a combination where you see, you see like a bar with a line graph, or you see like a map with a table. So you can have combinations as well. Definitely give yourself opportunities to try all of these different ones. Also remember, there will be different language required depending on whether task 1 is static or whether it's dynamic. So what do I mean? I mean that some of them show change over time, and those require you to use a different set of vocabulary and a different set of language than you would if it was just like a snapshot of a picture in time. Like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are some that don't show change over the time, that just show, this is the situation. They never tell you when it occurred or if there was any change. Those require also different vocabulary and different language. So be aware of that and make sure you have enough practice with all those different types. The next suggestion that I have is, again, not just for those of you who self-prepare, but for those of you who may be working with a teacher. Read as many good sample essays as possible. I really think it's so important. In fact, one of the things I also like to do with my students is we read other people's essays and we critique them. We gain ideas from them. We gain vocabulary from them. We look at different grammatical structures and we say, hey, look how nice that was, and how can you incorporate this into your writing? And that's basically the idea, like, how did this person develop? So we basically pull it apart and analyze it to see what's useful, what's good, and not only that, but also what we don't like. It's important to analyze what you don't like, because then it gets you thinking, well, what do I do of these mistakes? Or, is this a mistake I could potentially make? And how would I improve upon this essay? Really, I think reading model essays or sample essays is really, really important. If you do this with a teacher, that's great, because a teacher can really guide you on what to look for, on, just really analyze it. Now, those of you who are preparing for IELTS by yourselves, you have a different kind of task. Your work is a little more challenging, because I also advise you to read lots of sample essays. But you have to really be careful about where you find them and what you read, because in the 10 plus years that I've been teaching IELTS, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of essays online, and you know what? They call themselves model essays, but they're not. So you have to be really careful. The internet is a wonderful resource. There's so much information available. Great, great, great things to use in order to help you prepare for IELTS, but you really have to know your source. You have to know if it truly is a good essay, if it's from somebody who is really familiar with the exam, if it's somebody whose English level is really high, because I read some stuff, where the writer of the website claims like, oh, this is a band 9 or this is a band 8, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, no, I don't think so. Because there's lots of things wrong with it. So really, really, really be careful. But like I said, do try to find a couple of different sites that have good sample essays and really try to learn from them. Like I said, do some analysis of the whole essay, and there's so many things that you can pull apart. And it's sometimes really helpful also to have the band descriptors with you and say, yeah, I can see why this person got a band 8 or would get a band 8 because, in task response he did A, B, C, D. Or yeah, it's true. His coherence and cohesion is flawless. It's not the kind of thing that it's got words like firstly, secondly, thirdly, lastly in every single sentence. So have the band descriptors with you so that you can think about what examiners think about when they look at these essays, and really kind of analyze the things and see what you can take away. Because I really do think that, some of the best writers are also avid readers. So in order to write well, it's important to read a lot and to, I'm not saying steal ideas or anything, but you can definitely, pick up on new language, on vocabulary, on grammatical structures, on, how to kind of connect your ideas. So it's a great habit to get into. Okay, I think that is more or less the ideas that I think that if there was one other thing I just want to remind you about, it's that IELTS preparation is a marathon. It's not a sprint, okay? I know some people come and they say, "Oh, I've got a week to prepare. I've got, 2 weeks to prepare." Probably not a good idea. I mean, even if a native speaker were to take the exam, it's probably not enough time. I mean, not that the person wouldn't do well, but they certainly wouldn't get the score that reflects their actual language ability. And I think I've said this before in one of my previous podcasts, this is a language test, but it's a test. And so it's not just checking your language skills, it's checking your test taking skills. And this is why it's really important to have someone who is really, really familiar with the exam, guiding you and helping you along the way so that you can develop both those sets of skills simultaneously, both the language skills that you need in order to improve and to do better with your English, but also to help you with those test taking skills that really, no number of grammar and vocabulary books could really ever teach you. And I think I've said this again in the past, it's an investment. It's an investment in your future. It's an investment in your life plans. So take it seriously. Give it the time and the care that it needs. Okay, the last piece of advice that I want to give before we finish up is on how to deal with your own essays. Not just the essays that you write, but the essays that you have written. I think it's really important to learn from not only the mistakes of others, as I suggested you should do with other sample essays, but also it's important to learn from your own mistakes. So when you get your essays back, what are you doing with them? Are you reviewing them? Are you seeing like, oh gosh, I've made this mistake before and I keep making it? I had this one student who refused to write such as. He just kept writing such, just such. And I remember saying, it's quite a while ago, you can't keep doing this, and it's a mistake you keep making over and over. You have to learn from it. I said you have to correct these essays. You have to do something with them in order to kind of make you a little more conscious, because I don't think he even knew he was making the mistake, but you have to really kind of raise how consciously you're writing some of these essays, because some mistakes you'll notice that if you're reviewing your essays, you'll say, wow, I keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, like with relative clauses. Those are mistakes that people will make just continuously and not learn from. So take those essays and review them and study them and, write down the wrong version and the right version, even like 100 times if you have to, so that it can really become implanted in your head how something is written correctly. I think that was my last little piece of advice. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope there was some sort of tidbit of information that will help you with your IELTS preparation, with your IELTS test day. I want to wish all of you good luck. Definitely check out the website. The online course is fantastic. Lots of people signing up and doing really, really well, reaching their IELTS goals through it. There's also essay corrections through the site as well that you can look into. Very helpful to get really, really important feedback on your writing. Okay? As we all know, getting feedback is so important in order to improve and get to the next level. I want to wish all of you good luck. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, bye-bye.
for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.